This show is brought to you by Asino Resources.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 8/21/19. 10 days left in an amazing month, especially if you were invested in precious metals for once. Finally, the past 30 days have just been stellar and probably more of that to see. But there's other things going on too. You know, your government is always out to help the little guy, except that not really. I saw a recent interview of the following person, and it was done on Tucker Carlson's show by Mark Stein. And lo and behold, it turns out that big companies, big oligarchs are getting much of the funds from the SBA. And, you know, they're getting it from the Department of Agriculture, which is supposed to help small farms. But most of the recipients of their largesse are actually big corporate farmers. So you've seen him around before, no doubt. It's Adam Andrzekewski. And Adam, you're with openthebooks.com, which basically blows the lid off of wasteful and misallocated government spending. I mean, it sounds to me like you need a staff the size of the GAO to really get to the bottom of all the waste and fraud that's going on in the U.S. government, Adam. But you're doing a pretty darn good job of exposing it all.
Well, I appreciate that, Kerry. Thank you very much. We have a small, hardworking staff, and it's amazing. It's amazing what a small team can do. Look, we live by the 2 pizza rule. If your team's larger, than that if 2 pizzas can't feed your team, then the team's too large. We have fit well within that rule, and we're having a national impact.
All right. Well, hey, maybe I'll contribute a couple of pizzas to your effort there.
That's great.
Hey, you just pick the one that you like, and we'll call in an order for you. Okay. So
excellent. We like pepperoni.
Okay. Well, you got it. Whatever you want. I'm kind of a pizza margarita guy myself. I love the dill and the mozzarella cheese and the tomatoes. But in any event, hey, there's so much waste going on here. Where do you even decide where to set your sights? How do you decide it?
Well, it's a target-rich environment. And, I've been on your program many times in the past. We've talked about all kinds of different tranches of federal spending that take care of the big guys and not the little guys, whether it's from the Department of Education, the colleges and universities. They're making big money. The students are bearing the brunt for generations on the student debt. Whether it's these large nonprofit hospitals, the 82 largest nonprofit hospitals across the entire country, they made last year, their net assets increased by $40 billion. Yet the price of healthcare is through the roof for we the people. And now we come to this report that we just came out with on the quote unquote Small Business Administration. Kerry, that's the federal agency that's supposed to be lending to mom and pop businesses on Main Street. Those men and women, those scrappy entrepreneurs who have great ideas that cannot find financing in the private marketplace. And this is the federal agency that's supposed to plug that gap. But what we found was that the money is not going to small business. It's not funding the mom and pop businesses on Main Street. Oftentimes it's going to Wall Street. Look, over the course of the past 5 years, we found 40,000 entities received an SBA-backed loan of more than $1 million. Since 2007, there's been 75,000 entities that have received an SBA loan greater than $1 million. We mapped it all. Everybody listening to your podcast can come to openthebooks.com, surf our interactive map, click a pin, that's a zip code, and you can see who in your own backyard got an SBA loan for more than $1 million.
More than 1 million. That sounds like a little bit big for small business, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a good example of this is right in the nation's capital, in Washington, D.C. We found 7 really high-end restaurants in D.C. that got SBA loans for more than $1 million. Some got up to nearly $5 million of SBA lending. One of these entities is an oyster bar, and they sell a plate. They'll sell you a plate of oysters as a menu item for $80. So I mean, you're talking a high-end restaurant. But Washington D.C. also has. They got about 250 food trucks. Again, scrappy entrepreneurs. They have their food truck, and we ran all of their corporate names through the SBA lending database. And guess how many got SBA funding? 0.
Really?
So that the small businesses, which is the mission of the agency, they're off mission. It's morphed. They have mission creep.
Yeah.
They're funding the big guys and not the small guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why am I not surprised about that? I mean, doesn't it seem like the function of the government has been to support the corporatocracy rather than small businesses, which the government says are responsible for the bulk of new employment? Big businesses aren't in the hiring business. They're in the firing business. How did this come to be?
Well, I think the SBA, it's just a classic case of where the insiders see a pot of money and they think about how to get their hands on that money. And I think a great example of this from our openthebooks.com oversight report on the SBA over the course of the past 5 years is the amount of funding that went to not Main Street, but Wall Street. We quantified $12 billion funded some of the most successful and highly capitalized venture capital firms, mezzanine finance firms, private investment pools, investment bankers, investment pools. And that's not small business. Terry, one of the examples that we highlight in the report, $300 million worth of SBA funding went over to Hercules Capital. They're in Silicon Valley, Palo Alto, California. And they're so successful as a firm. Their stock is traded on the New York Stock Exchange. They've got a firm valuation of $1.3 billion. Very successful. Why do they need taxpayer subsidized low interest lending from the Small Business Administration? But here's the thing. In March, and this goes to the character of the firm, the founder and CEO was among those scooped up in the college admissions cheating scandal.
Really?
It took the firm 4 or 5 months till the end of July to execute a separation agreement with him, and they're going to pay him out $9 million of stock and $2.5 million worth of cash.
Well, that's just outrageous, and it's basically they've hijacked the government's programs to line their own pockets, right?
And here's another example of how the insiders, the fat cats in communities all across America have hijacked the Small Business Administration. And it's the lending to country clubs, private country clubs, golf clubs, swim clubs, beach clubs, and yacht clubs across the country. Now, since 2000, we've been on this for a good bit. Since 2007, our auditors have quantified about $300 million in lending to these clubs. In the past 5 years, the practice continued. $120 million flowed to these exclusive clubs. For crying out loud, there were 74 yacht clubs in the last 5 years, all across the country, who received an SBA loan or guarantee amounting to about $36 million. In fact, the SBA found a yacht club in Oklahoma and gave them $4.2 million.
You think that's a little outrageous? I mean, well, really?
Gary, you can sail your yacht to Oklahoma and park it. That's the good news.
I guess you have to put it on a trailer and kind of bring it across I-80 or I-70. I don't know where it is. Which interstate? I-20, I think it is, goes through there. Now that I think about it, I went through it once. But this is madness. And
it is.
Look, what's the you probably haven't had a chance to figure this out yet, but what percentage of these unworthy corporate nobles default on their loans?
Well, it's large. And in the report, we detail this. So the congressional, so in 2020, the SBA will loan about $44 billion, which is a tremendous amount of money. To put that in perspective, it's about half of all, the Department of Education doles out about $100 billion worth of student loans every single year. So this is about half of that, $44 billion. And the Congressional Budget Office forecasts that taxpayers are going to be on the hook for $4 billion of it, 9.5% of all loans that the SBA lends in 2020. The Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, they forecast those loans are going to go belly up and taxpayers will subsidize $4 billion.
That's insane. Well, it sounds like a better investment than student loans, though, doesn't it?
Well, and here's the interesting thing. The SBA, they use a methodology to forecast zero taxpayer subsidy. They say that the gains of their portfolio are going to offset the bad debt. Well, if you apply the same methodology to student loans, the 2020 portfolio of student loans are going to make taxpayers $4 billion. Nobody expects that, just like nobody thinks that the SBA loans are going to be zero subsidy either. Applying the correct methodology from the Congressional Budget Office, the SBA is going to lose $4 billion, and education loans are going to lose $17 billion. And that's more in line with popular expectation.
So what's the answer here? How do we solve this problem? I mean, because obviously these programs ostensibly were created to help further small businesses, but in fact, what's happened is it's just become another honeypot for big business to exploit government handouts.
You're exactly right about that. And here's what needs to happen. Taxpayers need to raise their voice. You need to contact your member of Congress with hard in-district details about who is receiving SBA $1 million loans. And we actually made it easy for people to figure that out. So if you go to the website at openthebooks.com, it's linked within our oversight report. I put up a piece at Forbes on the SBA funding $12 billion to Wall Street and these 40,000 $1 million loans. And in the piece at Forbes, we hyperlink to our interactive map where you can see in your own neighborhood where the money's going. And so when you call your member of Congress, you'll have hard facts and specific details. For instance, if you have people listening to this podcast in Beverly Hills, California,
well, there's a
we
needy
found
bunch.
that $120 million worth of SBA lending went into entities, businesses in Beverly Hills. You've got law firms, plastic surgeons, physicians on Wilshire Boulevard. You've got high fashion design schools getting big amounts on lending. You've got retailers in Beverly Hills. Retailers selling alligator leather belts for $750 and cowboy boots for $3,400 a pair. You've got a 30-year importer of French wine in Beverly Hills that received $1.75 million. You've got an eyeglass designer whose frames are worn by Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, who received $2.2 million.
Oh, they're worthy.
You need to call your member of Congress with the in-district detail of who these insiders that are getting the big SBA loans and demand hearings in Congress. And we'd like to be a part of those hearings.
Well, the thing is, what Congress will do? They will just revamp the program and make it harder for small businesses that really are deserving and worthy of these loans. They'll just make it harder to get them for them.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Be sure to take a look at Ross Beatty-backed Osino Resources, a gold explorer in mining-friendly Namibia. Osino's district-scale land package is near 2 producing gold mines. Osino's management team previously developed and sold one of them to B2 Gold. Its founders and management are experienced mining professionals. In the past 7 years, they successfully developed and sold 2 companies. Osino's excellent shareholder base includes Ross Beatty, owning 20%, insiders at 5%, and resource capital funds with 8%. Drills are turning, exploration is ongoing, so you'll definitely want to pay attention to Osino. It trades in New York under the ticker symbol OSILF and in Toronto under the ticker OSI. Find out more, go to OsinoResources.com. That's OsinoResources.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, and that might be true, although I don't know how you could make it any worse at this point. With more than half of all lending So think about this. 57% of the entire portfolio lent in the past 5 years was $1 million or up. We lowered that threshold to $500,000, which is still a big loan. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I've never had to ask anybody for a $500,000 loan, right? That would be a big loan. 75%, 75 cents on every dollar the SBA lent in the past 5 years was $500,000 or up.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's pretty remarkable.
So they're just not funding Main Street.
Yeah.
They're funding the fat cats and the insiders.
Yeah, there's something really wrong with this. Something big time, really wrong. And it's just so illustrative of the way our government today functions or doesn't function, right?
Well, it's true. And furthermore, it actually has a pernicious impact oftentimes on local marketplaces. One of the instances that we're familiar with is a really affluent area, a hometown area, where there was 4 generational family-owned jewelry stores. A new entrant showed up in town, authorized by Rolex watches, and they came to town with $4 million worth of SBA lending.
Wow.
And so here you have the 3 generational jewelers who pay taxes. And their tax dollars now in their core market are being used against them with the new entrant armed with their $4 million of taxpayer subsidized lending. And that is when the SBA unbalances a level playing field. And it has a pernicious impact on jobs, jobs that they say they're trying to create.
Huh. That's kind of shocking. And so they're creating competition where none is really necessary and where it's really damaging to companies that aren't relying on a government handout, and $4 million.
Well, and I think let's put a fine point on that. So in the private sector, competition should come from the market and not the swamp.
Yeah, that is a great point and well stated. So we've got to get our Congress critters to do their thing. But, Congress doesn't get reelected by not giving out the goodies, right? That's their whole reason for being, it seems.
Well, and unfortunately, the Republican head of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, just whispered in the president's ear, Mr. President, don't worry. No president has not been reelected by spending too much. And that's coming from the guy who's not a socialist.
Yeah, well, ostensibly he's corporatist. So I don't know which is worse. But really, it's kind of upsetting when you look at it. And
it is.
You know what it's like in these third world countries? We go and they're having some troubles producing food. So we just give them, tons and tons of food for nothing. And that has the effect of putting the existing farmers in those countries out of business. Because why pay for it when you can get it for free?
Exactly. So, look, it's a target-rich environment at the federal level for oversight. We have never, not one single time, looked at a tranche of federal spending or a federal agency and found just wildly massive problems with it. And so, at this point in time, these reports are important to educate the American people. The federal workforce is not a bunch of technocrats who know how to spend our money better than we do. Our reports show that when they spend our dollars, they're wildly off mission oftentimes, just extraordinarily and wildly off mission. And the more money of ours that they spend oftentimes, the more things cost for the United States taxpayer, whether it's in education or healthcare, or now here through the Small Business Administration funding the wealthy lifestyle.
Yeah, it's madness. Well, hey, I think it's important that we have more Rolex watch dealers in the community because everyone benefits from that, right?
Here's an interesting story, Kerry. So we identified pattern and practice SBA a couple of years ago. They decided to fund Lamborghini auto.
Really?
In Orange County, California. And the program ended up pretty much in disaster. They had over $4 million worth of lending out there to these three Lamborghini auto dealers, and 2 out of the 3 went belly up, and the third one, the loan was canceled and never extended. So in Chicago, $1.3 million on a $2 million loan, taxpayers ate it because the Lamborghini dealer went upside down. In Ohio, taxpayers ate more than $200,000 on a $1 million loan because that Lamborghini dealer went belly up. So again, the market should be making the decisions, not the swamp. And under no circumstances, let me be very clear, should the SBA have a program of lending to Lamborghini auto dealers.
Yeah. It's just insane. It's really insane. And, everywhere you look, it's happening. And that Trump can't stand this. That he hates the idea of all this waste and corruption and inefficiency taking place. Has he convinced himself that it's just going to be, he'll deal with it in his second term, or wait for the financial system to collapse?
Well, I think that's a dangerous moment if we ever got the financial system collapse. And I think it's a dangerous moment for the president to punt a war on waste to the second term. Look, I talked to a mid-level SBA bureaucrat on an airplane before this report, and he was traveling, manages a big district out west. And here's what he told me. I asked him point blank, have you seen any change in governance at your agency through the Obama years into the Trump years? And he looked at me and he said, no change, none whatsoever. So the president, he needs to start holding his agency secretaries and administrators accountable for the performance of their agencies. And he needs to spend political capital to engage. We encourage him to embrace the transparency revolution, to institute a war on waste and report to the American people at least monthly the progress of or lack thereof of his war on waste.
So it should become a major priority. I always go back, probably read about the Grace report, right? And that was identified like 25% of the government spending, or a third, as much as a third, is really wasteful.
It was a third.
Yeah. And, he's done some things like with highway construction, infrastructure projects, streamlining them. What do you think is the best thing he could do here? Because he could change most of this through executive order, couldn't he?
Well, he can do a lot through the power of executive orders. And one of his good executive orders, Gary, was right when he, right after he was sworn in from Inauguration Day, where he instituted a freeze on additional hiring in the executive agencies. And we've got the recent data on that. It's been very, very successful. All the federal agencies, the head counts are down, and oftentimes down sharply, except for those agencies where he made campaign promise. He promised to take care of our veterans. VA payroll headcount is up sharply. He promised to secure our borders, and Department of Homeland Security headcount is up sharply. But other than that, it's all down, and oftentimes down double-digit percentages. So that was successful. He needs to do the same thing on waste. We've encouraged him that right now, before they do use it or lose it spending here in September, in the last month of the fiscal year, the president should at least tweet, if not call a press conference, and tell his federal agency heads, if you cannot spend all the money that Congress is throwing at you, don't spend it. Don't waste it. Hold back. Defend the American taxpayer. That's not only good policy, but that's good politics, probably with the support of 99% of the American people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Because there's that annual spending orgy that takes place where everybody, it's use it or lose it. How about if you just lose it automatically and then you have to justify spending it before you get it back? They could do that.
Absolutely.
Could be lose
That's
it.
what needs to happen. We did an oversight report on that in March. On the September 2018, last year, the federal agencies in the final week, they blew through $53 billion worth of contracting. In the final week, they spent 1 out of every $10 that they spent on the year. And then we detailed all the waste, which was extraordinary. So that this would be a public policy and political winner for the president to stand up there now. ahead of September and say, look, if you can't spend all the money that Congress is throwing at you, don't spend it.
Well, there's always a reason why it has to be spent, right?
Well, in the slump, there's always a reason.
Yeah,
there's always a justification.
Even if the reason of it escapes everyone completely, right?
Absolutely. I mean, so when on this report on the SBA, the Small Business Administration, we went out to them for comment. And first off, they didn't want to comment on the record. They only wanted to talk off the record, which we found extraordinary. But then we pointed out our questions were of grave public concern. And they are a federal agency, and they're public officials, and they should respond publicly to these very simple and basic questions.
Yeah.
And so we finally got them on the record.
Yeah, like how much is 2 + 2, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing
exactly.
they need to be held to account. So what you're basically saying is there's zero accountability in any of this government spending, right? No one's accountable.
Well, and that's why our founders feared government. They feared the administrative state. They trusted regular people and individuals across this great country. And we need to get back to those roots.
Hey, and if you remember, one of our founding fathers said, and I think it was Jefferson, but don't quote me on it, is that there's no greater societal ill, or governmental abuse of power than forcing ordinary people to be altruistic on causes that they don't support. That's like the ultimate abuse of freedom, and that's what we have here.
That's what we have. And then furthermore, we have hardworking, principled, working class and middle class taxpayers funding private country clubs, funding the wealthy businesses in Beverly Hills, putting $12 billion toward the most successful Wall Street bankers in this country. When I asked the SBA for what's the public purpose, how can you compel working and middle class taxpayers, they didn't actually answer that question.
Yeah, because there is no answer for that, right?
I agree with you, Kerry. It's important to let everybody listening to your program know that this is going on at the Small Business Administration. What a nightmare.
A total and complete nightmare. And it's being replicated all over the place by agencies, you name it. The Defense Department, they're probably the worst. And then everything else. I mean, hey, you can't trust the government to do anything. That's why they should only be delegated very fundamental tasks that only they can perform and hope for the best. Boy, this is like through the looking glass here, Adam. So I guess the best thing to do is go to openthebooks.com, find out more about it, see how the government's wasting your money. Hey, we really appreciate you coming on, Adam. Questions, comments, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. Hey, appreciate you coming on. We'll talk to you again real soon.
I've enjoyed the program. Thank you.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.